Cleanup continues on the UCLA campus after a week of protests took over the university's outside common area. Some classes did resume on Friday, but they were held virtually. Security remains tight as university officials continue to deal with the aftermath of the protests, including the threat of strike action from the largest union of academic workers, representing 50,000 workers in the University of California system. More than 200 protesters were arrested this week when police moved into the encampment, which sprung up earlier. Encampments remain in place across other schools in the United States. So let's talk about that a bit more. We are joined now by Mindy Romero. She is a sociology professor and the director of the Center for Inclusive Democracy at the University of Southern California. Professor Romero, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Romero, I'd like to begin with your initial assessments of what we've seen take place at university campuses right across your country and ours with these students. How significant is this as a political movement?
It's very significant. Young people throughout history really have been the catalyst, right, for most social movements. They start with the young. The young are often the ones that are pushing a movement forward, pushing a society forward, and actually are the ones doing much of the work, much of the sacrifice. And regardless of how individuals may feel about what young people are doing, they are saying, many young people, not all, but many on campuses are saying that they are deeply concerned about the war. They want to be heard. They want to be heard by their universities. They want to be heard by the Biden administration, and they want to be heard by others. And they also want others to hear, to maybe come to their cause, right? And generate attention for the large issue that they hope will continue to gain momentum.
So let's focus in on the Biden administration. They want the federal government to listen. Is the administration listening to them?
Well, I mean, ultimately it's up to the students, right? But I think just the other day, we saw the president speak briefly. He was asked about, if the protests would change his policy stance, right, the policy of his administration on Israel, and he said no, and it was pretty abrupt. He made some comments, I think that some people interpreted as threading a needle, talking about the right to protest here in the United States and our democracy, but also that people don't have the right to violence. I think maybe some young people or some people in that movement might have seen that as being called out, right, or not supported or not listened to. Others may have appreciated his comments, but I think there was some concern that he, just the short-natured attention, right, and the type of comments that he made was not what the young people at least were hoping for, and they want to be heard, they want to be listened to, and of course they also ultimately want change.
Is this going to cost him come presidential election time later in the year?
Well, the youth vote is powerful. It's powerful in numbers, powerful in potential, but the reality is in every given election, presidential or otherwise, young people vote at much lower numbers than older voters, and presidents and candidates and campaigns know that. And so I think they want more of the youth vote, but they are also, and I think the president in this case as well, he's the president of the United States, but he's also a candidate, right, for re-election. And he's thinking about all of these public statements, right, and ultimately even potentially his policies, how they appeal to the potential full electorate. And I think he could lose some support, yes, among some young voters. What we don't know is the young voters that would not want to vote for him if they would turn out to vote anyway. So some of these young voters who do not want to vote for him may not have voted anyway because of low youth turnout. Some voters may decide to keep out of the election altogether, right? They could turn to a potential viable third party, third candidate that arises. But at the same time, I'm sure the president is thinking about, again, how he's responding to these protests and how the larger electorate could gain him some votes potentially in other places, people that see him, that want a middle ground, that don't want him to support the young protesters, regardless of maybe even political stance, just don't want young, educated, people on campus being encouraged to protest. So the bottom line is a long time between now and November. A lot can happen with the war. A lot can happen with U.S. policy, potentially. A lot can happen with other dynamics, other policies, other issues, other priorities that could happen for young people. Young people are juggling, that are thinking about voting, juggling not just this issue that they care deeply about, but also, of course, other issues and what will be their the issue that they vote on, things can change. And I think we just need to keep all that in mind. The one thing that's really, I think, very, very noteworthy right now in terms of all the analysis about the November election is that there is great momentum that is building, right? So there's been concern for quite a while this last year over the war, but now we're seeing momentum really build on college campuses, and what that will do potentially for the rest of the electorate, we'll have to see. But momentum is very significant in politics and in an election year.
But the momentum is also building on the other side, the counter protests as well, where many members of Jewish communities and allies have come out saying, hey, this is going beyond just protesting. This is becoming dangerously threatening. Some people feel like it's become anti-Jewish. It's become anti-Semitic. So how does the president respond to that concern?
And I think he is, again, in some small ways, right, by talking about how these protests shouldn't be violent, right? I would imagine there are people, as I said, regardless of there's many perspectives that are happening on campus. Of course, there's deep held feelings across the United States on this very important, critical topic and the war and what's happening in people's lives. And I think probably many people don't feel like they're being heard all the way around, right? Regardless of where they're coming from and what they want the administration to do. This is a very difficult topic for a president in an election year to address. It is one that he has a responsibility to address, just as the president, right, because of his policies, right, by definition. The fact that the U.S. has a policy and he is the president, so he has to talk about it, right, and defend it and educate people about it. Whether people agree with him or not is another thing. And then so hopefully he's doing that, right, according to what he feels is right as the president of the United States. But then there's what he feels he needs to do as a candidate, right, to how it influences potentially his reelection. And I'm sure there are definitely people on that, again, on all perspectives here that are concerned, pleased but not pleased enough, very upset about what he's doing. And that's the difficulty. And being president versus a challenger like Donald Trump or other challengers can kind of decide how they want to weigh in, at least at this point in the election cycle. And the president's the one that's out there talking about literally the policies of the United States. And so there's a lot of attention, obviously, on what he's doing. And it's very difficult to navigate that. And there will be people that will be critiquing how he is just publicly explaining and talking about it, and are concerned about how he's just publicly explaining and talking about this to the multiple perspectives that are out there. As a president, he has a responsibility to do that. As a candidate, he's having to be also strategic at the same time. And that can be very upsetting to some people when they want full transparency and full dialogue.
Okay. Professor Mindy Romero, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.